Man, this has been a crazy year, not only because of COVID, but also because of the sheer number of launches and actually amazing launches we've had, and yet the fact that so few people actually have any of the stuff that's been launched. We've also had some incredible and terrible games, including Cyberpunk, which is both the best and worst game of 2020, and games like Fall Guys and Among Us getting really popular, and a whole lot else. But we still have to talk about Tech of the Year, what impressed us, what kind of let us down, and everything in between. And this year I let you decide on Twitter and on YouTube. Now I asked a series of 5 questions, one each day for all of what for you will be a couple of weeks ago, the week prior to Christmas, and I tabulated the answers because, voting on both Twitter and YouTube, you kind of had to see where everything sits. And so, without further ado, let's get into that. So the first question I asked was about product line or best product line of the year. There have been so many good launches this year, and since Twitter only lets me put 4 different options in, I had to condense it to product lines and then follow it up with a second question the next day to talk about the individual products. With that said, the product lines that I picked were AMD's Ryzen 5000 series CPUs, their RX 6000 series GPUs, and Nvidia's RTX 2000 series GPUs, and then other, and you could reply with any given answers. Now the winner here, and probably isn't too unfamiliar to you since you might have answered the follow-up question the next day about, who won in the specific product instead, but the winner was AMD's Ryzen 5000 series CPUs by a convincing 63% of the vote. Now I could go into psychoanalyzing the kind of results here and perhaps talk about maybe how, well, most people are probably looking to upgrade their GPUs, and so the lack of stock of those GPUs is going to affect them more, or have a more negative opinion of either of the company's GPUs, rather than the CPUs, which just are seen as sort of innovation, but maybe you don't actually need to buy one right this second, and so the stock worries don't worry you. But either way, they are the winners. They are pretty deserving of it too, considering the performance uplift and the new redesign as well makes a pretty big difference. Now, like I said, the follow-up question the next day was, out of the winner, in this case AMD Ryzen, which of the new CPUs was the best? The 5950X, 5900, 5800X, or the 5600X, and rather unsurprisingly, the lowest value and therefore the most approachable for most people item, the 5600X, won by a pretty convincing lead. I think it was about just shy of 50% of the votes, which is, well, yeah, a healthy margin. The 5900X surprisingly wasn't too far behind, but the most value chip was the most well received, who'd have thunk it? Now, as for question 3, well, that one was me being I guess having a bit of fun, especially with the answers. The question was, what's the best console of the year? Now, the obvious answers or options you could have had here are the PS5, Xbox Series XS, maybe even Google Stadia, and well, I decided to put PC because I knew it was going to be a bit of fun, and it would also get a lot more engagement that way, and so I could tabulate the answers for the actual consoles a little bit better. But either way, unsurprisingly, PC won by like 72, 73% of the votes, actually 76. So yeah, not unsurprising. I'm not blown away by that answer, considering this is a PC tech channel. But what was more interesting is that if you look at just the consoles and exclude PC from the category, then the PS5 won by a fairly convincing margin over the Xbox. Now, that was actually almost double the votes of the Xbox on YouTube, and it's still a healthy margin on Twitter, which is kind of surprising to me, considering that for the most part, it seems like, well, I guess from my outsider perspective, the Xboxes have had a maybe better value proposition. They obviously have 2 different consoles you can pick. There's Xbox Game Pass for PC, which I would assume would be better for, people who are both console and PC players. But hey, That's the winner. Question 4, I was expecting to be, let's say, less engaged than the one the day before, which is about monitors. I review so many of them that it feels a bit strange to exclude them from this sort of voting or categories, and so Monitor of the Year was up there. Now, I put basically the monitors that I thought were the best that I have tested so far. Things like the Gigabyte M27Q, the Acer VG271UP. I threw on an ultrawide there as well, the AOC CU34G2X, although the Iyama one could have been there if you'd prefer, which actually a couple of people did reply in the comments to suggest that one instead. But the winner here was actually Other, at least by vote count anyway. Now, because there wasn't a very good consensus in any of the comment sections about which of the other monitors were best, technically speaking, by default, the one that got the actual most votes was the Gigabyte M27Q, which I think is fairly well deserved. It's a bit of a gamble in terms of, I guess, the panel quality, but it's a gamble that can massively pay off if you get a good one. For me, that is a very impressive monitor, and, well, like I said, it is a bit of a gamble in terms of its quality. Yeah, the payoff is fantastic. And finally, there's Game of the Year. That's technically tangential to Tech of the Year, but since this is a PC gaming or PC hardware gaming channel, and we generally build gaming PCs to game on them, well, it kind of makes sense to ask the question. Now, as for my options, because I can only have 4, again, it kind of, well, it very limited me here in what I could ask you. Now, the thing is, we have to put Cyberpunk as one of the options. It's been the most hyped game for literally 8 years, and it finally came out, so it has to be on the list. I also put a sort of variety or a selection of different types of titles. So Microsoft Flight is on there. Of course, that was a very well covered, talked about, and to a degree hyped game as well. And I also threw on Half-Life Alyx because it is a very well received, very impressive game, admittedly for I guess, platform that a very small subset of PC gamers have access to, but I thought I would ask anyway. And of course, Other is an option for you too. Now, generally speaking, Cyberpunk won by a reasonable margin here. I think it was 39% of the votes, which again is more than you would need for a healthy majority in terms of out of 4 anyway. There was a number of good suggestions, especially in the YouTube comments. There was a lot of good options there, so I'll let it scroll through the screen and you could take a look at them and maybe check some of those games out if you're interested. But on the whole, despite Cyberpunk being a buggy mess and definitely needs some refinements, it's still an incredibly impressive game with a very intriguing story, at least as far as I'm through it anyway. And despite me needing to reload the game quite a few times and some mechanics being a bit on the naff side, it's still been a very fun play. But what about me? What's my Tech of the Year for 2020? Well, that one's really difficult for me to answer. The obvious, suggestions, things like Ryzen 5000 or AMD's RX 6000 or Nvidia's RTX 3000, all of those are amazing, but the fact that there has been so little stock, the fact that I've only been able to check out one of those Ryzen CPUs, one of those AMD GPUs, and that's because it was a sponsored video so that they could send me the 6900 XT, which, very nice by the way, very good to game on. And then, the RTX cards, I've only had a couple of those in. It's pretty hard to say that any of those are kind of Tech of the Year for me. With that said, all 3 of those are very impressive launches. I am incredibly excited to see AMD back at the top end. It is, like a lot of people said, a sort of generational leap for them, whereas for Nvidia, while it is a great step forward and the pricing has come sort of what we'd say back down to where we would like to have seen it last generation, still it's kind of a incremental step, whereas for AMD, it's a massive jump forward, and so I guess they kind of pique my interest a little bit more. The work that AMD is doing, especially in the laptop realm for their CPUs, is also incredibly impressive to me, and I'm really looking forward to seeing Ryzen 5000 series CPUs in laptops at some point in probably the next 12 months, just because how slow those sort of development times take. but once they do, that will be incredibly impressive, and I'll be very interested to see what Intel has to offer next year, both in laptops and in the desktop space. I'm expecting a launch probably not overly far away, and yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they have to offer, and maybe even if they can launch something again later on in the year, maybe I suppose 2022 if we're pushing that. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting year going forward once stock becomes available for the parts that have already launched and for the new things that will inevitably launch next year as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. With that said, this is, I think, the last video that will go up in 2020. It's been an amazing and terrifying and insane year. I've launched 2 other businesses. One is At The Wheel, my car channel, and one is Locally Links, my short linking tool for creators. And you know, there's been a lot happening, the MSI stuff, and just, you know, a lot has gone on this year. It's been insane and just an amazing experience. I've been thoroughly enjoying being able to share as much of it as I can with you guys. So thank you for sticking around, and I hope that you are able to stick around for for next year, see what happens then. Hopefully we'll be able to do some more traveling to trade shows and stuff, doing some more collaborations and checking out, well, a whole load more stuff. So we'll see what happens. Either way, thanks for sticking with me, and we'll see you all next year, which is in, what, 2 days' time? I'll see you guys then.